Welcome, everyone, to Breakthrough Nation live chat again. This is a great evening to connect with you and to share with you some of the amazing things God is doing all around the world, particularly the advancement of God's kingdom in the marketplace. And tonight, I have some special people with me who will be talking with me. I'll be asking them questions and discussing the topic of entrepreneurism and business in the marketplace. But this is all very kingdom. And so it's a joy for me to introduce to you my guest for tonight. I'm going to start with this young man. He's his first time to join us tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bobby Aiken. Bobby, it's good to have you with us. Before we go on, Bobby, would you like to just say hello to everybody? Just let people know who you are, where did you come from originally, where you are now, and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, I'm a Christian businessman who is originally from Scotland, but now gets to reside on the Sunshine State, and I am a business improvement consultant these days, working in and with a number of clients, and also engaged with Christian leaders across the city, and still back in Perth, where I've recently moved from, to progress the kingdom wherever we're at. So,
exactly. Yeah, thank you, Bobby. And also, please welcome Tina Vaca. She's joining us tonight. And I got to tell you that many of you don't know, but Tina has been doing businesses alongside building church and work and family and everything else. She is actually doing some amazing things. And so, Tina, would you like to say hello to everybody before we continue with our conversation?
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be back on the Breakthrough Nation chat again. It's been a little while. So, yes, I've been doing business, I think, when I reflect upon it, for probably 25 years. There's a bit of a backstory to that, but maybe it'll get shared later on in our conversation tonight. But it's nice to be here.
Yeah. Thanks, Tina. And I'm excited about tonight, Bobby and Tina, because the topic that we have chosen in in this whole kingdom conversation, which is focusing on business and in the marketplace. Bobby, I'll come to you first. We met probably about a year or maybe longer than that. And I didn't know that you're actually a businessman. I thought that you're just one of the pastors that came to that gathering we have just down the road. But meeting you again and realizing that you're actually doing something phenomenal in the kingdom, particularly in the area of business. Can you just start by telling us what you were doing in Perth before you moved over?
So I was blessed to do a number of things in Perth, but I kind of have. David Balestri, who you've had on a number of times, he talks about the different graces and kind of callings within the kingdom marketplace. God gave me the opportunity to step in and minister alongside pastors and things like that, but always from a business perspective. And so I worked with a number of pastors in the city to help support Movement Day. I had the honor of David Hodgson, who you may know. I had the honor of helping bring Kingdom Investors into WA and setting that up and getting that running in WA. That was just over a decade ago. So I was involved in helping lead that for over 7 years. Just being available to be where God wanted me. I mean, I've had the blessing of God opening doors where I ended up helping lead 24/7 prayer for when Choggum came to Perth. I've been actively involved in helping set up and run some prayer ministry. Basically, a lot of things where I suppose project management skills and these types of things come into play. God's just opened a door where I've been able to step in and support those things being birthed and growing within Perth. So, yeah.
So here you are, just a businessman, but you are so involved with pastors and, of course, church activities in the city. The reason why I highlighted that is because there are so many business people out there who are not really getting on well with pastors, and particularly the whole church arena or realm of things. but you seem to be very different. How did you manage to sort of bring yourself into that relationship? It seems to me like you're very comfortable in it.
I think it comes down to a matter of perspective. So for me, I'm not just a Christian who attends church. I'm a citizen of the kingdom, and I have to operate out of that. And when you start thinking kingdom dynamics instead of church here, business here, government over here, kingdom's actually all of it together. Yeah. Sure. And when you shift your mindset into that realm, then there's not pastors and business people and politicians. There's kingdom leaders. And some of them have to lead in different dimensions and different aspects. But we're all side by side to achieve the same outcome. And we can actually only achieve the true growth of the kingdom if we learn to walk side by side and work together.
Yeah, so good. I love what you're saying, because we have talked about that perspective and that approach from a pastoral point of view on this program, but it's good to hear a businessman saying that. And you mentioned the politicians and other leaders from other spheres of life working together. The kingdom is holistic. It's not just church versus, or business people versus the church. Those days are over. Sorry, I'm going to ask you another question before I come to Tina, because Tina's been here. You're the new kid on the block. So can you define what is kingdom business?
So I come back to my previous comment about what is the kingdom. The kingdom is all of these things together. Yeah. So when we talk about the business dimension of that, God kind of gave me a bit of a revelation. When we talk about if the church and business and government in a kingdom perspective are all parts of the same puzzle, then to me, kingdom business is a business that represents Christ in the same way that we expect church to. Come on. Because we're here to be, as kind of Miles Monroe would put, an ambassadors of Christ, right? Yeah. And that doesn't mean just pastors are ambassadors of Christ, because there's a lot of people fall into pastors are the ambassadors of Christ, business people are just to fund them, right? Which I think it's part of what needs to happen, because business is how we generate cash, right? It's how we make money. Yeah. So it is an important aspect that it becomes the funnel through which money is generated and flows into the kingdom. But when we reduce it to that, we miss a lot of what can be achieved. Because let's be honest, business people are out where people who don't yet know Jesus are. They have more day-to-day interactions with people who haven't had the revelation of Christ than most other aspects. And in that, you have to be representing Christ and thinking about the way that you operate in a way that glorifies God every day. You come back to the Hebrew. The word for avoda, means worship in the Hebrew language, but it's also the root of the same word that means work.
Work. So you say work is worship?
Absolutely. So when you transform your perspective, that says that anything I do for work,
is worship.
You know, and the Bible says, do what you do as you do it unto the Lord. Right? And when we shift our mindset, that doesn't mean I go to work, then I find a way of going to do ministry later. It's I go to work because that's my ministry based on the gifting God's placed on me. And I then figure out, how do I use that to actually bless God and actually make God known, because I can be open about and being a Christian. Yeah. It's not just slapping a fish on your logo and making everybody know that you're a Christian business. It's actually fundamentally changing your business so that it resonates Christ through every interaction, and people will come to you and they'll ask questions and say, what is it about the way that you operate? Why are you different? Why do you care? You know, being able to talk to people and realize it's not just about making money. Making money is important, because otherwise your business fails, right? If you don't make money, you can't help fund the church. You can't help fund missions and all these types of things. But it's not just about that. There's more, because at the end of the day, the ultimate goal of the kingdom is to see people come into relationship and understand who their Christ is as their Savior and Lord, and be fully transformed in their lives.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Okay, Tina. I needed to ask Bobby these questions, because he's new and there's so much that he's got that we need to pull out of him. True. But you mentioned earlier about 27 years now, while we were building churches and the kingdom, that you were doing businesses on the side. Can you just talk a little bit about what you mean by that? And I also want to ask you another question about your MBA and how significant that is into this kingdom business that you have been working on the side, and where it's positioned you today. So we'll probably start with the whole business thing that you've been working on. So, yeah.
Well, when I say that 20 plus years doing business, and there was a bit of a backstory to that, I think is more that I didn't know I was doing business. I didn't know that I was actually gifted with business acumen and business skills. And really that came out of when we started and launched Breakthrough Nation. So prior to that, I didn't think that I was going to do business at all. I thought business was for finance people, accountants, numbers is all I thought. And so I thought, no, I don't want to do that. If somebody had told me, though, it was about making money, I would have jumped at it a lot earlier, probably. But, and so when I talk about doing businesses on the side, funny enough, it wasn't really on the side, it was actually integral to what we were doing. Yeah. And so building Breakthrough Nation, I've come to learn that breakthrough is actually a business. There's a business side to everything. Yeah. And so, building business was really about building this entity, this organization, this enterprise that has been, most people would see it as church, which it is, but during that journey, I think I've really come to understand that there's such a business side to it that I think every church would do to really understand how that operates. And I think most recently, one of the things I'm sort of really exploring more is looking at how to do church kind of differently. In the sense of bringing a lot more of maybe those kind of business things that can improve the church. It wouldn't improve the spiritual stuff. That's not what I'm saying. But I think when I look at it,
doesn't take away the spiritual.
No, it's more to add value and to facilitate and enhance that, because I think traditionally most people, like you say, you talk about perspective. I think traditionally a lot of people have this perspective that church is completely not a business. It should have almost nothing to do with business, whereas I have a slightly different view of that, probably from our journey.
And with your MBA, because I know that you spent a whole year. It was a terrible year for me, but it was a good year for you, because she'll come home and straight to bed, and it's like hi, goodbye, but it was worth it though. I mean, looking back now, it was great. How significant is that accomplishment to business in the kingdom and where God has got you now and working at university? Yeah.
I think it's very significant. First of all, I actually did the MBA because I felt that God said to do it. I had personally sort of wanted to do it for a while, but what really pushed me over the edge to do it was that sense, when you're praying that God says, okay, go do this. Now, it's important and it's significant because I believe that the things that God's called us to build has a huge business component and organizational component to it that is needed. And so I needed to upgrade my knowledge, my understanding of things business, even though I had a lot of experience and practice through doing the different things we've been doing. But I really felt it was time to really go for gold, go for the cream of the crop, so to speak, and really get the knowledge that is needed. And it was amazing, because certainly it opened my eyes to a lot of things that maybe I didn't know before. But I think what it really did was also explain a lot of things that I'd done over the last 20 years. It also helped me to understand, I think, a lot more of the innovations that are happening in the marketplace. You sort of hear about some things and you sort of maybe read a few things, but you don't really have an understanding. But now doing the MBA has really given me a lot more depth of understanding. And certainly in my role now where I work I think the MBA was instrumental in helping me get that role. And there are other opportunities that open up from that. So very significant, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should mention the chancellor's honors list. You know, do you want to mention that? I mean, the only reason why I say this is because many people in the church and in the kingdom think that as long as you are saved and you're comfortable in a church, but the way you're thinking and the way you're talking, because I know you, it's about high achievers. It's about being the best, whether you are studying, whether you're working, whether you're running a business or being a pastor, whatever. In a kingdom perspective, you've got to be the best God has made you to be and become that and express that. Because I've seen that in your life. Did you want to just, because I know you want to shy away from letting people know that, you know, you're on the honors list, but tell us, what did it make you feel when you received that letter?
Yeah.
You know?
So I often think about Daniel and being 10 times better.
Yeah.
So in Daniel chapter 1, where his friends, you know, sort of separated themselves, but they ended up being 10 times better. And so that spirit of excellence, I think, is part of the kingdom that Bobby talks about.
Yeah.
And not that I'm in competition with anyone. I'm not in competition with the next business or the next person in my MBA. I'm really in competition with God's purpose.
Yeah.
And I'm not in competition. It's more that
No, I think it's right to say that you're just competing.
I'm competing. It's like
your
you've got a
destiny
race.
and
You know, and you, in Corinthians it talks about the race and run your lane, and so I think about that potential or that gifting or whatever it is that God's given me, and I think, well, I would be doing a disservice if I don't fully utilize that and exhaust even myself physically or mentally or whatever to actually fulfill that much potential that is in me from God. So yes, I applied myself, as you know. I applied myself for 12 months. It was really hard slog. When they say it's intensive, it was very intensive. It was basically eat, sleep, you know, study. That was it. And it was a really nice surprise to receive the award in the mail and the letter congratulating me on being on making the Dean's honor roll.
Yeah.
So
honor roll, the Dean's honor roll.
Yeah.
Okay. Bobby, on that note, you were talking to me before we recording about that story in Matthew 25, the man or the master who gave his servants talents, and the one with the 5 and 2 traded and gained 5 more. I mean, they did everything. They functioned to the fullest of their capacity and potential. And you touch on that. Can you just elaborate on that concept? Because I think it links with what Tina said about being excellent and being everything, wherever God placed you, you know, in the kingdom, and maybe related to what you do as a businessman, as a kingdom businessman. Yeah.
Look, I think when we were talking earlier, we were talking about the fact that when we look at particularly business people, when we look at people in the church, we still use worldly metrics to measure kingdom success. And I think it's fundamentally flawed. So Tina, as you say that you've done excellent in the MBA, and that's part of your gifting and the way God's made you. So that's you using the fullness of the gifting that you've got, and that's why you're getting the honor and the respect. But not everybody has that gifting. And so for the fact that you've done it is brilliant, but we shouldn't expect everybody to do that. And I think this is where we get wrong. It's about understanding who has God made you to be and actually operating in the fullness of the gifting and the anointing that's on your life. I think you mentioned that you felt you did it because you felt God called you to do it. And so we go to, it comes down to what we're all called to do, listen and obey, right? And it's fundamental. And God asks us to do what some people consider weird things. You know, from a church perspective, being asked to go and do your MBA instead of being asked to go out and feed the homeless, or, you know what I mean? It seems a little bit strange, but God knows what he's doing because he knows what he's expecting and he knows what he's creating and where he's trying to place people. And I think that thing that we got to stop measuring ourselves against other people. So you talk about the 5 talents, the 2 talents. If the person with the 2 talents was busy just looking at the person with the 5 talents, rather than going, I've got these 2 talents, how do I use them most effectively based on who I am and what I can do, instead of always trying to go, well, I'm never as good as them. Yeah, because the end of the day was, well done, good and faithful servant. And they were greeted with the same greeting, which was acknowledgement that they weren't expected to deliver the same results. They were expected to use what they had to the best of their ability, which is where you come back to the 100%. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're talking about fitness, mental intellect, or wherever else, right? We all can do our 100%. It's just 100% for different people looks different. You know, not everybody's an Ironman, not everybody's running marathons, right? But we can all be fit to an element. We can all be intellectual to an element, and you've got to figure out, where am I at? And how do I use that and become the best that God has made me to be so that I can thrive and do it?
And I think that's really,
go for it. Yeah,
I think that's really important, because you find that there are lots of people in the kingdom talking kingdom, church, but the reality is there's actually a lot of competition. And people,
comparing.
and comparing, and I think that's one of the saddest things, because people are comparing themselves to other people, other people's achievements, and I think we're not supposed to do that. We're actually supposed, and that's why I say I was only comparing myself, I guess, to the bar or the, what do you call it, the plumb line that God has for me. So that's sort of the carrot stick, if you like, that I'm chasing, is his plumb line for my life. And that may be different for other people. But I think that's really important, because I do see that in the church and even in the kingdom, that you've still got people who are comparing themselves to each other, but we need to just go, yay, God.
But the call and the gifts and the grace
Yes.
that God has given for all the different gifts, and also the destiny. You know, you measure yourself up against your own destiny. The other thing, Bobby, that I wanted to ask you, being a businessman in the kingdom, in the marketplace, can you just share some of the challenges that you've come across and how you've overcome these challenges?
So, look, it's interesting. I actually at one point was an assistant pastor in a church. Okay, so look, I say
And that
this
was more challenging? No,
no. Just because I think when you talk about one of the challenges from a Christian perspective, one of my challenges, my initial challenge, was realizing that my call was not to serve full-time in a local church, but was to actually serve in the marketplace.
But there was a stepping stone, was it?
It was an absolute step. So I was operating in the marketplace. I was serving in my local church, because I fundamentally believe we're supposed to be planted in a church, be part of the community, be a part of being engaged in that. But then I was asked to take on the role of assistant pastor. And it was interesting, because I actually had a dream the night before where I was asked that question, but I said no. And I misinterpreted the dream that it was a warning that I should, and so I said yes, right? Later on, I learned quite distinctly that actually I was supposed to say no, and it was telling me what to do. Because prior to that invitation to become an assistant pastor, I was traveling around as a businessman. I ended up preaching in Bangladesh, up and down in Mackay. I was in Darwin. God was opening doors for me to be able to interact purely as a businessman, not as a pastor. The minute I became an assistant pastor, every door to ministry closed. And for the next 18 months, they remained closed. And the day that I resigned from being an assistant pastor, because I was clear that that wasn't where God wanted me to be, I was a bit slow in the uptake, but it took 18 months to get actually clear, because I was conflicted with this, I'm supposed to serve in church, that's how I minister. And God's saying, no, that's not what I'm saying. The minute I actually resigned, the phone rang with somebody asking me to go and minister.
On that note, Bob, because I want to come back to you on that, because I think you're hitting on a mindset that's prevalent in Christianity and the church, that to serve God, you've got to be within the context of the local church to serve God. But what you're talking about is serving God is really where God placed you, whether as a politician or a businessman or a sports person. Otherwise, you'll be frustrated, right? Until you get to that sphere that God has placed you. And it's like put a fish out of water. You struggle, but if you put that fish back into the ocean, you become what you're supposed to be. So that was your experience, being in the local church, but being released now in the marketplace. You feel that freedom and doors were opening even for you to minister.
Yeah.
Can you just maybe talk a little bit more about what happened after that? You were traveling.
Yeah, so I mean, immediately doors began to open. It was shortly after that I became involved in Chogam, and wonderful lady Wendy Yap, who in Perth I met, and God had just given her a vision to support what was going to happen in our city with prayer. The Bible says we're to pray for our leaders, and she took that with both hands and said, we're going to have 54 nations leaders right here in our city. We need prayer. And so that kind of went from let's have a smaller prayer, let's have 54 churches praying, but it just exploded into we lost count of how many churches were praying. And there was a 24/7 prayer event, and that opened doors to then Kingdom Investors, and some of which is now Kingdom Initiatives, and some of these, and it just became this cascade of opening doors from beyond there. As I became more comfortable in my identity of who God had made me to be, I was free to operate out of that with no worry, no kind of condemnation, and not trying to fit in a box of, no, this is what you should be doing. I was like, well, this is actually who God's made me to be. I'm just going to bring what I've got and offer it up. And if it's of service to other people and they can use it, then we'll go and we'll carry on forward. And you say, well, how do you overcome the challenges? It's that simple thing as any Christian. Get to know God, listen, and obey.
So simple.
It
and
is
yet so hard.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's more questions on that I want to ask you, Bobby. But Tina, there was a time in our journey in Breakthrough Church, before we shifted to Breakthrough Nation, you become discontented and you were struggling with some things. There was a level of frustration, which I look back now and I know, I understand. It's God,
Yeah.
And I think from that point to where we are now, I know that you started Scripted, which is the business arm of what our family. I put myself there because I know it was your initiative, but I saw something good happening and I just attached myself to it. I think that was also a frustration, but it was a necessary frustration for you. Can you talk about that point and how that has actually thrust you into where you are now with with the studying, but also business? I don't know whether you want to talk about Scripted or, but please talk about that journey, that part of your life. Yeah.
So it was before we switched to being Breakthrough Nation. I think we were already Breakthrough Nation. So it was probably about more than that, about 6-7 years ago when the frustration started. But it was a real God frustration. And essentially I'm sitting in a conference and we're traveling, and we'd traveled a lot in those sort of 6-7 years prior. And I'm literally sitting in a conference and I felt the Lord say, now you need to go home and start a business because you need to become everything that you're preaching.
So good. That's good. I like that.
And I was like, okay, I don't know.
Be the message you're preaching.
Be the message. And so the frustration really became more about I didn't want to hear another message and I didn't want us to preach another message. And it wasn't me, it was a bit of me, but I think it was just really a journey that God got me on. And it was about, okay, it's time now to manifest those things and to manifest the things that you see prophetically even, and the things that God has spoken to us about prophetically. And he was saying, you now need to put legs to it. You need to put strategy together. You need a project plan. You need to do all this stuff because my word is true and real, but it needs to be seen by people in tangibility. And so that's really what sort of started the frustration. That's what started the journey into business. So literally at that conference, and I think it was the last day of that conference, and it was so clear to me. So, and to be honest, it was quite personal because you and I think in our holiday times, we'd always talk about, oh, let's do this business and we could do this and we could do that. But it was just holiday talk. And it was like God said, no more holiday talk. I want you to actually do that now.
Real talk, kingdom talk.
And so, yes, we had been doing all the ministry and the movement that we started, but he was really leading me down this path into business. And so he said, start the business. I had no idea of where to start, how to start. But I thought, well, you have the internet. We have so much information at our fingertips. It's not going to be hard. Yeah. Well, that's what I thought. And it wasn't. But it was, that's how I started the business. And then the first thing that we did with the business, or that I did with the business, was actually put myself out there as a consultant. So, and that's a whole sort of another story.
Yeah. No, but it's good that you're able to step out and obey the voice of the Lord, even though for me, I didn't fully understand at that time. But looking back now, I praise God that you did that, because I've seen great fruits. And so, Bobby.
But it's an interesting point you make,
Yeah.
because when I stepped out of the assistant pastor role, my pastor at the time couldn't understand it either. And it did cause a bit of stress in that relation. I mean, we stayed in the church and everything else, but there is sometimes when that drawing, because there's a mindset that's a little bit historical that says the church is the place through which ministry is done. As that new revelation of the full kingdom dynamics, that actually ministry is done wherever God decides he wants you, right? I mean, you can read through the Bible of ministry being done outside the temple, outside the business, It's all over the place it's getting done. And you've got to go where God tells you to go.
And it's funny that you say that, because that tension, I'm laughing in my head while you say that, because I think, don't you just know what you're doing, God? Because we're married. We can't actually just break that relationship and just go, okay, but I think the tension there, though, is a real tension that happens in a lot of churches, because a lot of pastors don't understand when their members might feel a calling out into the marketplace, and because there's not that understanding, they either get ostracized, or people feel like they don't fit in the church, there's no place for them, and pastors are getting frustrated with their members because they're not turning up to church, or they're not, doing ministry the way that the pastor thinks it should be done. So I think there's a real tension there that in this kingdom age that we really need to unpack and bring all parties together to have an understanding, because we're all on the same team. We're all about the same goal. We're all just called to do it differently.
And it's good that you guys are talking about this, because people out there are struggling with where God is placing them now, the relationship between being part of a church and being out there in the marketplace, whether you're called to be a politician or businessman or sports person or in the education and any arena outside of the four walls of the church. And that tension, I do believe it's happening all the time, everywhere. But for me, it was a real experience, and I was just thankful to God that He opened my eyes to see it, and I should be exercising that with everybody else that are connected to me in the church. That if that tension comes up again, I've learned from this, and to be more understanding and more accommodating. So not perfect yet in that area, but it's good that God is doing something fresh and new in terms of the kingdom and the church breaking out of the four walls.
I think the biggest challenge, or the biggest thing maybe that needs to shift, is mindset on both sides. The members, the pastors, the leaders, the church leaders, because as long as we can shift our mindsets into the kingdom. And not just our mindsets, but then everything changes, or everything probably needs to change, like our operations, the way we spend our time, and where we give our energy to, because that's my place of ministry. But I think one of the other things that we've got to be conscious of, when you come to the revelation that actually your place for ministering is out in the marketplace or wherever that might be, it doesn't replace your engagement in church, because church is your community, right? It shifts your perception of what church is for. Okay, so
when I think about church, church isn't a place that I go necessarily to be involved in ministry. To me, I can't wait for the day where people are rocking up at church, not to see ministry happen, but to share the ministry they've seen occur when people have just been blessed by God moving in the marketplace. And people are being brought in to celebrate what they're seeing God doing through the world, not coming in with an expectation, we get to see ministry happen and then we've got to go back to the world for the week, right? Where we begin to transform the whole way. Because church is where we're supposed to be getting taught, re-engaged, re-encouraged, refreshed, so we can be going back out to fully minister with strength and with, it's that encouragement, and it shifts the paradigm,
On that note, Bobby, because we've seen a lot of people in our churches, in our movement, catch the kingdom message and they take off, and to the point they don't come back to church. And we've seen them crash and burn. And I love how you brought that up, because you're actually living it. You're in the marketplace. But you see church as a vital element of your spirituality and your function out there. Can you maybe touch a little bit more about why people in the marketplace must not neglect the gathering of the church or coming to church? Can you just add a little bit to what you said already? Because I think that's a very important message.
To me, church is where I can get taught and stimulated how to better relate and understand God. Okay? Because let's be honest, in the marketplace, everybody talks about being time poor and everything else, which I think is actually a tool of the enemy to distract you from your calling, right? I know a number of people who are thoroughly excellent in their paradigm, where some were in law, some business, and these types of things, who have lots on and achieve massive amounts, but still have time for all the important stuff, church, family, and everything else, right? And they still do. For me, coming to church is an opportunity to worship. It's an opportunity to hear, to be stimulated, to be taught from the Bible, to keep seeing things because I don't always have time to study the Bible the way I would like to, right? I would love to dedicate days and days to studying the Bible, and some very successful businessmen that I know do dedicate a whole week to just studying the Bible and praying. Okay. I've found that's not a door God has opened for me yet, but I'm praying that that's where it gets to, because I want to have that one-on-one connection with God deepened every day and every week to the point not to replace the need to be taught, but the community that we get, to be supported by other believers, to engage, to just be in a space for worship, I think is really important. It does something inside to your soul.
And you've seen the impact that you have when you go out again on Monday. Because I keep using this phrase in our church, that church is like the locker room, getting us ready for the game that starts on Monday. The game starts on Monday, because many people live for Sunday, but we should not live for Sunday. We should actually live for Monday. But church is so necessary for the game on Monday, because you've seen the impact as you were talking after a great service on Sunday, being with the brothers and sisters, worshiping God together, the fellowship, the word, and the presence of God. Come Monday, can you just touch on some of the things that happened to you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, after a great day in the house of the Lord?
Well, look, it's... I suppose it comes down to your mindset about church. Do you attend church, or are you part of the church? Because those are two different dynamics and two very different perspectives. Because if you attend church, you do the church thing on Sunday, and then you've got to put on your business hat to go. If you're part of the church, then you get reinvigorated through being part of the community and everything, and then that comes out in the way that you interact. Right? Because you're thinking about, right, okay, you go in, they used to wear the bangles, what would Jesus do? You're thinking about that and you're praying, right, okay, God, what am I doing today? Where am I going? I've almost been blessed in one of the funny ways that one of my roles over a few years ago, I was working for a large multinational, and my job was working across the whole of Southeast Asia, in a continuous improvement role where I would fly into troubled areas within the company all over Southeast Asia, and I would have a couple of weeks to fix the problem and get everything right. And I would fly in, I would spend 2 or 3 days doing some understanding, a bit like when Nehemiah went and surveyed the walls, that kind of thing. Begin to understand what's there, fly out, wait for a week, fly back, and I'd have a week to fix the problem. And I would be on a plane thinking, God, I have no idea how this is going to happen, but I have faith that we'll make it happen. And without fail, by the time we left Friday, we'd hit every target and generally exceeded them. And I don't take all the credit. We were working with a team and people, but being involved, my job was to help inspire and facilitate that group of people to achieving the outcome. And time after time, we did it. You know, and when you're in that place where you're going, God, I haven't got a clue how this is going to happen. I have to rely on you for revelation, for words of knowledge, for inspiration, so that we can kind of move these things along. And that to me is where it comes from. Because if I'm in church on Sunday, and that was one of the other beautiful things about traveling. I was able to, in Muslim countries, go and visit churches and, you know, and just being inspired by believers in other parts of the world who have to make a life or death decision whether they go to church. Yes. And that also helped shift my paradigm to church. We take it for granted so much in so many nations that it's like, oh, I don't know if I can be bothered going today. There are other people who are sitting there going, I have to go today because I cannot live in this environment. And we forget that out there in the world, we live in the Western world, we can forget that it is toxic culture that is anti-Christian culture, most of it. If we don't get realigned and re-immersed in proper truth and wisdom, we can get battered and drawn off track by that constantly toxic culture.
That's it.
Yeah.
So true. And I love how you're making the connections between the church and the marketplace, which is really the kingdom. You know, the two really need to work hand in hand.
It's full symbiosis.
I love that. I love that word. Did you experience the same thing, Tina? Because I know me being a pastor, and you preach about here one Sunday ago about why it's important for marketplace people to make church a priority. You know, can you just touch on that, even with your experience with work? After a great service on Sunday.
No, it's so important because that is where you really engage so much more with the community, as Bobby's saying, but also just the spiritual essence and presence of God is so needed to really help you through the week. Like you say, you know, it's the locker room. And you get charged, you get empowered, you get understanding, and you get tools, you know. And I always say, I have the saying that the deeper that you're called into the marketplace, or the deeper that you're called into sort of dark places, the deeper you have to be so deeply rooted and connected to a good church. So good. And I like what you said, be a part of it. Don't just attend.
Don't
because
attend,
I think,
but be a part.
because I think lots of people tick the box. We have a real tick the box culture. I've done it, you know, I'm looking good. But really, are you really being accurate with the way you're supposed to be in that community, and play your part as you're supposed to? But it's so important. So important. And even like, you know, from our journey, having seen many have so much sort of success in so many different ways, and also, unfortunately, in many other ways, almost sort of lose their soul or lose their spirituality. And you know, that was never God's intention, and I don't think that's how it's supposed to be. I think we're supposed to get stronger in our relationship with God and deeper in our relationship with God as we go out.
And I think there's another aspect to this as well that I think is important. We talk about business people shifting their mindset to church. We also want pastors to shift their mindset to business people. So we often, and you'll see it in church, we're going to bring out our missionaries and we're going to pray for our missionaries and that kind of thing. But then we fail to recognize that actually there's everyday people, and if we genuinely believe that they're in their calling, they're operating where God wants them, they're actually in their mission field every day. And so we need to be mindful of the shift that they need prayer. So intercessors, pastors, praying for those people and helping them get into the right place. And I'm not saying that everybody that's out there in the marketplace is in their calling at this moment in time, but we should be able to get into our alignment and begin to understand and move in our calling. You'll find that God will take you into incredible places. You know, and we'll be able to bring that out. And if we bring the spiritual covering of the church back over those that are operating in those spheres, I think you'll see massive dynamic shifts and impact and true transformation, which is what the kingdom is about.
Yeah, so you're saying that it's not just praying and releasing and ordaining pastors to fivefold ministers to build churches, but even if a politician emerges in your church who's called into the political arena, we should treat that politician the same way. Pray, cover him, ordain him, release him, you know, and a businessman, a sports person, everyone that come into the understanding, as you said, probably not everyone now, but there's certain people that you can see that are maturing and they're discovering, you know, their main thrust in life and their space in this world, and treat them as you would treat pastors. That's what you're saying. And imagine if you have a church that literally anoint and release and cover and pray and stand with everyone. What a transformational church in a given society. Yeah. On that point, Bobby, some of the we already talked about the challenges, but some of the principles, key principles that you've learned in the marketplace as a businessman that has helped you, given you some of your successes that you have experienced to this day?
I think it's take God at His word. Well, we in the business, we get in the marketplace, and some of us get into the attitude that the stuff that gets taught in church can't apply in the marketplace. Right? That we have to actually go by what we've learned in MBA or what we've learned in the different schools of business or anything else. And what you tend to find is those businesses, there's nothing that's really that different from what everybody else is doing. A great Christian businessman, kingdom businessman, actually down on the Gold Coast, a guy called Dave Rowlands, came and he was speaking as part of one of the Kingdom Investors meetings that we had. And he started talking about the importance of Psalms. And Proverbs, and reading a proverb a day, because there's 31 proverbs.
So this is a businessman reading Proverbs a day, and he's successful in the marketplace.
To the point where he will recite any proverb you want, verbatim, because he's been doing it for so long. But just the fact that you immerse yourself in the wisdom of the Bible, right? The Bible doesn't just tell you how to go and kind of evangelize people. It teaches you everything you need to know to be successful in life. It's just you need to read it, you need to pray about it. That was one of the things that Dave Hodgson has been very successful, is in teaching the Bible as it applies into business, okay? The whole aspect of it is shifting our mindset to recognize the Bible does have the answers to the problems. Whatever problem you're faced with, God has the answer. And if we take the time to listen and obey, and I mean, it sounds overly simplistic, but that whole aspect of the key principles, whatever you're facing, wherever you're going, whatever's going on, if you bring it to God, He will help you find an answer and a way through.
So good. How important then, Tina, you probably need to jump in on that question, but I'll ask you this question, Bobby. How important then is networking for a kingdom businessman in the marketplace, networking with the right people, with like-minded people, particularly other kingdom business people? How important would that be in your success?
Look, for me personally, in the kingdom business space, meeting some of the people I've mentioned and being able to have dialogue that shifts the dimension and thought helps propel me into that space more every day. Okay, it challenges me on where I'm at, which I think is part of the point that we should have on a journey, right? Is iron sharpens iron. By rubbing up against, we're only going to get sharper and better if we're around people that challenge us and tell us to move and think and everything else. So I think it's absolutely vital that we are engaged in conversation. And it doesn't matter whether we end up doing business with these people. Yeah. Just that association and that vitality, the opportunity to learn. Yeah. I mean, if we're to be true disciples, we're to be constantly learning and constantly open. I found that God has created relationships, not just with Christians, but with positively minded people who open doors and who maybe won't be attracted to what they recognize as your Christianity, but they will be attracted to God within you. Yeah. And whether they know what it is and can put a word on it, that's what they'll want to do business with, and that's what they'll want to connect with. And I've had a number of times in past when I've been praying and God said, call that person. So when I set up my company in 2017, God said very clearly, I want you to trust me with this. Do you trust me to provide for you? And I said, yes, I trust you to provide for me. And he said, well, don't want you to market. I don't want you to advertise your business. So I've never advertised. I've never marketed my business. And I've had some of the biggest clients in WA when I was there call me up. I've had opportunities open up. And the only times I've done anything close to marketing is because God put it in my heart, phone this person. So I phoned them. And every time I did, it opened a door that has led to something else that's bigger, and sometimes it's cultivating relationships, sometimes it's other bits and pieces. But if we listen to what God's saying, he opens doors because he knows where he wants us. And I'm not saying that nobody should advertise or market. That's not what I'm saying. That was the challenge that God put to me as to whether I trusted him when I stepped out of the boat, because I was working for a large government agency. I was in a cushy job. I could have stayed there. And he said, step out of the boat and trust me. Yeah.
And that is basically doing business with God, or God being the CEO or the owner of the business, and you report back to him, in this whole kingdom thing. Tina, with where you are with the business you're running, can you just share a little bit about some of the key principles that you know that is working for you? Yeah.
I think what's been really key for me in every role that I've done since opening the business has been people. Treating people with honor and respect, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, no matter what their history is, no matter whether other people in the organization like them or don't. To God, they're important. And just that real valuing people. And in the different businesses that I've been involved in, I found that that has been really key, because at the end of the day, I think everything we do is about people. Every business should be to improve people's lives. Jesus died for people. So that very simple sort of principle, if you want to call it that, of just treating people with respect, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or just the whole respect and honor, I think is so important. And I think it's really important because in business, people quickly and easily throw respect and honor out the door because you cross them, or they did something wrong, or they constantly do something that they shouldn't be doing, or they annoy you, whatever the reason is. But I've found that when you go beyond that and you see people the way that God sees them and treat them the way that God loves them, that brings a whole different dynamic into your business and into whatever organization you're a part of. And you were talking before about, or asking about, challenges. I think one of the challenges in the marketplace, very realistically, is not getting caught up with all of that kind of people talk stuff. Because
there's a name for it. Gossip. Slander.
Well, I mean, really.
Social media.
No, really, not getting caught up in it, because you don't realize that you can if you're not on guard. And I think about the scriptures, Philippians, and it says, think on these things, that they should be noble and all the rest of it. And so I think about those things, and I think even though before me are a group of people, or people who maybe have done things that cause other people to talk about them, but you've just got to be the peacemaker and got to be the one that brings solutions to it rather than.
So basically, what you're saying is what we've learned in the church.
Yeah.
You just transfer those values into the marketplace, into the business.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down when you talk about the way you treat people. I mean, there are a lot of businesses that operate profits over people.
Exactly.
And we see that rampant in the world and the way the world runs business. The Bible, I mean, there's a number of things the Bible teaches, but two key things that come prominently the way I read the Bible, and that could be because of my perspective. Servant leadership, which again is how you lead and serve people, right? How you treat people, as you've mentioned, but also stewardship. Yeah. Fundamentally, all the way through the Bible. And when you talk about two key principles, God will always talk to you, in my experience, in business, in regard to these two. Right? When you're listening, it's about how do you treat people and how do you steward that which God has entrusted to you. And I think that's common for any Christian, anybody who serves God, comes through that same kind of aspect. How do you do? Because this is one of the critical things I've learned from some of the millionaires that are true kingdom business people. They've all almost been brought to a point of having nothing, to where they were able to realize that they genuinely have nothing. They just steward what God has entrusted to them. And you fundamentally shift your perspective. Because when it's not yours, you're not better than anybody else. You know what I mean? It really helps you level because you're not sitting there going, I've got millions of dollars. You're going, God's got millions of dollars in my bank account and I'm waiting for him to tell me what to do with it.
Because you're just the manager and the stewards of somebody else's
Absolutely.
stuff.
And it just shifts your mindset.
We have one more question. This conversation is actually going really, really amazingly well. We need to have this again, part 2. But what would be a word of encouragement from the both of you to those in the marketplace, the entrepreneur, those in business, and those who are just starting out or maybe have already been there for some time but need to just break into new levels of success in the marketplace? What would be one or two things you would say to these marketplace influencers and leaders out there? Tina, we'll start with Tina, and then Bobby, you can wrap it up for us tonight. Yeah.
I think everything we've talked about tonight has been really significant and really important for anyone that's in the marketplace. It doesn't matter where you are, whether it's business, education, doesn't matter what the industry. But I think a couple of things that I'd really encourage people, I find myself encouraging people so often recently, has been to just step out and take the risk and to do it. The reason why I say that is because there's a part of me also that says, really encourage you to know God's voice and listen to him, because that's fundamental. But what I've found in my journey is that some people try so hard to be perfect in hearing his voice that they don't do anything. So it's okay to take the risk and
make mistakes.
And you'll hear God's voice clearly along the way. It's all part of learning and part of knowing who he is. You'll know his heart, you'll know his desire. And so I would really encourage people to take the risk and even just to stand up and be that different person in your workplace or your business, or not to be afraid, I think, which is sort of in line with taking a risk. Yeah.
So you're saying, Tina, that it's okay to make mistakes, in a marketplace, but just step out, take risks, and if you miss, you miss, and if you fail forward. You always learn from,
Yeah, and I guess I say that maybe with a bit of an assumption that your heart is for God, that you're taking the risk and you just want to do God's will. And if God's will is, you feel, to be in the marketplace, to do a startup or, try an idea, then do it. But just always stay so close to God.
And keep going to church, hey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think
so
definitely plug in.
Yeah. Bobby, what would you say to the young entrepreneurs, the marketplace business people, whether they're just starting out, or maybe they hit a rut and just need something that will just cause them to go to the next level?
Well, I think Tina's nailed it with if you stay close to God, you must know his voice. The only way to do that is spend time with him. Right? You've got to build a relationship with God. And sometimes when you do that, God's going to ask you to do something that's going to seem like it's right out of left field. Right? You had mentioned about your MBA, and that it seemed like a strange request, but you knew it was from God, so you followed it. Almost a year ago, God said to me I was to move to Brisbane. Right? It was out of the blue. We'd been in Perth for years, but I knew it was God and I never doubted it. So I knew I had to move and I had to do it. God will ask you to do things that are out of the blue. If you're in business, you have to be prepared to fail. Right? You look at any of the great entrepreneurs, they will all tell you, and it's a sad fact, as people, as human beings, we tend to learn more from failure than we do from success. And so, you've got to be prepared. When God tells you to do something, it doesn't matter. Again, the caveat being, you do spend time with God and you know it's God, right? You know God's voice, because that's really, really important. But when God tells you to do something, you just move. And you won't understand it, and you won't need to know all the details, and not everybody will understand it, and not everyone will like it. I've got a number of people who didn't like it when we suddenly moved across the country, ministry partners and friends and all these types of things. But when God tells you to do something, you've got to do it. You know, when Abraham was told to leave his family and travel across into places that he wasn't, he didn't have to question it. He just said, I've got to go. You know, you see these throughout. People that were asked to do things. Noah was asked to build a big wooden box in the middle of nowhere, right? Everybody took the mickey out of him for 120 years, right? But he knew what he was doing was what he was called of God. And whilst we might not know why, we might not understand it, if God tells you to move, move. If it's start a new business, if it's move into this place, if it's do that, take the step. If God calls you to go and study something or learn about something, pick up a book. You know, it starts really simple, and God, as he takes you on that journey, grows it and takes it. And God's still taking stuff that I learned 15 years ago and bringing it back into relevance now. And you don't always need to see the end result, but trust if God's telling you to do it, to step out and go with it.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an amazing conversation. And I know as you're watching this, you would agree with me that we need to take God that we've learned in the church, his presence, the values, the principles, and transfer them into the marketplace, because you need God more out there. Particularly when you're hitting brick walls and setbacks and darkness and challenges, as Bobby and Tina has actually described. So I want to encourage you to please make sure that your friends who are with you in the marketplace watch this, and stay connected to God and stay connected to our church. I love what Bobby said. Don't just attend, but be part of the church. And I tell you, this is the era where God is now raising up an army of entrepreneurs and marketplace leaders in the different arena, not just business that we're focusing on tonight, but even in the political, in education, in the legal system, in family, in community, because that's the kingdom. It's holistic. It's God in everything. That's the way I see the kingdom. And so tonight, thank you for being with us. I hope that this message has blessed you thoroughly. And we pray that God will bless you and make you successful where he placed you. In Jesus' name, join us same time, same place next Sunday. Goodbye.